with video on, if possible, of course. Alrighty, so we are at 802. So I think do we kickstart? Yes?
Yeah, I think so. Let's get started. I'm sure Rebecca has got a few questions. Rebecca Roberts, you said you had one or two. So here we go.
Okay, so welcome to the Property Cove. The topic of today is purchasing property in extraordinary times. Now, today we have Geoff White, we have Stevie, and we have Cohen. So I may pass it on to Geoff. Go ahead, Geoff.
Yes, thanks, V. I just wanted to remind everybody here that what's contained and said in this live stream is the personal opinions of those present and should not be solely relied upon. We stress to everyone here that they should always obtain independent advice in relation to property finance and matters of a legal nature. So we just wanted to have that said first, and then I think over to Stevie for some housekeeping items.
Thanks, Geoff. Yes, obviously, being that we're most of us at home, being on mute, I think you all are, so that's fabulous, but being on mute will help with that, eliminating background noise. We will also be recording this session just to make you aware of that. And with your questions, as we are kind of getting through the content of the session, pop them in the chat box. Vina and myself will be fielding those and trying to collate any extra questions that come through. Thanks.
Thank you. So today, now we're going to kickstart with the introduction as such. So Geoff White, would you like to introduce yourself? Thank you.
Yes, thanks, V, and good that everyone can join. My name's Geoff White. I see some familiar faces there, Jack Henderson and others, Jeffrey. Look, I'm a licensed estate agent, giving some property advice, and also been involved in the industry and market commentary for 20 to 30 years, and working with a prop tech company as well at the moment. So that's me. But perhaps I'll kick off there, V, with a bit of an update on the market so that we set the scene as to what we're dealing with. We all know what's happening in the market, I guess, but some of the stats are very, very interesting to go through. We know that over the last 12 months, nationally across the country, we saw a 16% rise in dwelling values. So that's 16% over the last 12 months. And a very, very strong market in Sydney with 18% and Melbourne 10%. That's despite the lockdowns, would you believe? Even the lockdown of last year, Melbourne still had 10% over the last 12 months. This has obviously been driven by exceptional demand for residential property, and it's matched up against unsurprisingly lower supply of available listings. We did see the housing values increase month on month, and the peak was in March 2021. The demand for houses has really been the highlight of the last year, and it's led the increases in the dwelling values. So, for instance, Melbourne, we've seen a 12.3% rise in houses over the last 12 months, whereas the units have been 5.9%. Sydney houses are up 23%, units 7.6%. But if we go to the regional areas across the country as well, we've seen in most cases the regions have actually had a greater percentage than their nearest capital cities. So the regions are still performing very, very well. So as you can see, that when values are rising in the capital cities and across the regions of, in the order of 1 to 2% a month, no doubt the media, as we've seen, has been focusing on the property market and what's been going on, and somewhat sensationalising it too, as well. But whilst we've seen slightly lower dwelling values month on month over in recent months, the market right now is still very buoyant and very positive, and there's a number of factors that are obviously helping that along the way, which we'll discuss today. So, V, that sort of sets the scene. The market's, the dwelling values are up. The market's still performing well. Even last month, still rises in value. So, no matter where you look at either side of the country, it's still performing very well. Back to you.
Thank you. Now, is there, would you like, anyone have any question at this stage in regards to the property market?
I had a question actually during the week, and
Yes.
one of them, and it's a very interesting one. Should I buy now or wait? That's the maybe the $1 million question. But look,
Yes.
what I say to people, and just if I can just touch on that, what I say to people is that, you know, purchasing property is not just in relation to what the market's doing and what the news reports are. It really comes down to personal situations for everybody. So, you know, have you got your finances organised? We can talk about that. Are your personal situations right and ready to go? If you're not just reacting and hoping that, you know, you'll get in now and make money over a short period of time, you've got to actually look at this and not have that fear of missing out. The simple answer is that if you're ready and organised and able to and got everything signed off and you're ready to go, yes, you should buy. And buying now with the right advice and having the right approvals and the property that ticks the right boxes, definitely. Buying is a strategy, and it's not an impulse. And if that strategy is in place and you tick all the boxes, off you go. That's the answer to that one.
Thank you, Connie. I think probably, I mean, lots of buyers in the market at the moment. Some of them think, okay, do I buy now or do I wait? Because some of them think, okay, maybe there'll be some changes in the market, you know. So you have given us an update about how the market is tracking. So thank you kindly for that. So I think that ticks the box there.
So I have a question. I'm sorry to interrupt. May I just ask one question? Perhaps, Geoff, you might have an inkling as to this. Do you think we'll ever get to the day where units have a separate analytical study as opposed to the apartment market? I know the apartments are in the unit catchy, but given the density of the apartments and, you know, they're popping up everywhere in every suburb more and more every year, are they inflating similar to units?
Look at that. You're very right. Units, and we were talking villa units and townhouses being lumped in with apartments, and that's a very, very good question. I think over time they can be dissected. There's no doubt that, you know, the practitioners on the ground, and you're one of them, Geoff, are seeing very good demand for townhouses and villa units and those sorts of things, whereas the unit 5.9% is all encompassing, including the apartments, which is probably a bit unfair. So, yeah, I'd like to think that could be the case, Geoff, going forward. We'll wait and see whether the data companies will be able to dissect it that way. But the townhouse unit market, certainly in the suburbs, is performing better than the apartment market in the likes of the CBD. There's no doubt about that. So, yeah, good question though, Geoff.
Terrific, thank you.
And if I can add that, I think the regional area unit values are going up even higher. Experience of mine, I bought in Maroochydore just earlier this year for a client. By the way, I'm Jack Henderson. I buy property. Hello, everybody. G'day.
Hi, Jack.
Hi, everybody. I bought in Maroochydore for a client earlier this year, and I started the journey in June last year. And for exactly the same property that I looked at and valued at 500 or thereabouts in June last year, I finally bought that property for 850 in June this year. So that'll give you some idea of what's going on in the regional area of southern New South Wales, southern Queensland.
Yeah.
And I think that experience is reflected in units and townhouses in most of the regional areas. It seems to be the flavour right now for a lot of people.
Yes.
Sorry, Geoff. Is there any reason what drives the market going up?
What's driving it? Well, perhaps we can talk about that because there's buyer incentives, there's interest rates, there's all sorts of things. People at home and nothing better to do except look at realestate.com. There could be a major reason. So we'll perhaps get into that, but it's a good question.
Thank you kindly. I would like to introduce Stevie now. Stevie-Jade, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, yes. So my name is Stevie-Jade. I do know some of you in the room. Thanks for coming along. For anyone that I don't know, I'm a financial advisor at Tribeca Financial. So I kind of help with the planning part of the process when clients are interested in property at the front end, but also making sure that throughout the journey, they're thinking about things on the other side, like the cash flow changes, estate planning, insurance, all those things that come with, but are not as exciting as buying property.
Yes, thank you. So maybe I think the best question at the moment, am I going to miss out, or is this the right time to buy? So can you help us with this question?
Yes, I think Geoff kind of nailed it before. I had the same belief that there's always the right property at the right time when it's the right time for you and you've got your ducks in a row. And that is very much, you know, making sure your cash flow looks nice and getting it kind of nice in a little box with a ribbon on it for the lender to go, yep, no worries. And understanding what you're buying in relation to your borrowing power, making sure that it is a strategic purchase. You're not just, I've actually had a client say, oh, I accidentally bought property. He went to an auction, got carried away and bought it. So obviously we don't want that to happen, and that's partly what I do with clients, is making sure that doesn't happen. But I think there's a real, at the moment with that FOMO, what I'm seeing is that people think it has to sit in cash or go into property, and that's not the case. If it's going to sit in cash, you're going to actually kind of run out of steam and you're not going to keep pace with the market. But if your timeline to buy is maybe 5 years away, there are other things that you can do so that your money isn't just sort of sitting there getting eroded by inflation. It can keep pace with market changes, and then you can leverage and buy property later on when it's right for you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience today for Stevie at this stage? Alrighty, so I might move on to Ron Cohen. Ron, would you like to introduce yourself, please? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Vina. Hi, good morning, everyone, and thanks a lot all for coming along. My name's Ron Cohen, and I'm a partner at a city-based law firm, Tisher FC Law. My specialty areas are obviously property and business. We do conveyancing, leasing. I act for lenders and borrowers in terms of giving legal advice. Probably my main specialty areas, I do a lot of work with the real estate industry. I've got a lot of real estate agent clients, and we also provide support for real estate agents, buyers agents, vendors agents, whenever they or their clients need a lawyer to assist them. We do a lot of work in the property development space. So we do a lot of work with property developers, buying, selling off the plan, and that's become a really complex area of the law. There's been a lot of significant changes to that. So I've found that there's not as many law firms that are in that market as there used to be. And also we do a lot of work in the finance area. So I act for a number of mortgage funds where we prepare loan and mortgage documents. And on the flip side also, a lot of our clients we provide legal, who are getting loans, we provide legal advice to them. So in the property area, that's really my expertise.
Thank you, Ron. And I think today we're going to touch base in regards to contract preparation, execution, also conveyancing process and settlement. As we all know, there have been so many changes in our industry, whether we talk in the financial planning space, or even we talk about lending, or even if we talk about conveyancing and stamp duty and so forth. So maybe, Ron, would you like to touch base a bit in regards to stamp duty and the changes as from July for Victoria?
Yeah, I will. That's a really good topic, because there's obviously, first of all, different stamp duty rates in the different states, but certainly with Victoria, they've really tried to incentivise the stamp duty, particularly with first homeowners. There's still there's both grants as well as concessions, and there's first homeowner grant where you are buying or building a property that's never been lived in. If you're a first home buyer, there's also an exemption from stamp duty where the dutiable value is below $600,000. There are concessions where the dutiable value is more than $600,000 but less than $750,000. There are also off-the-plan stamp duty concessions, and the off-the-plan stamp duty concessions are really interesting. It used to really be that regardless of the value or the purchase price of the property, you only paid stamp duty based on the value of the land when you bought the property. They introduced changes to the off-the-plan concessions now, and it's really only available now if you are you want to reside in the property, so that the off-the-plan property is your principal place of residence. And also they've got a cap based on what they call the dutiable value of the land. So the dutiable value is really the value of the property, not the purchase price, but the value at the time that you enter into the contract. So there are different stamp duties. I won't go into it. There are just so many different permutations, but it's always part of our role when we do a conveyancing for a purchaser who's buying off the plan to calculate what their likely stamp duty will be.
Thank you, Ron. We have a question and a very interesting one from Rebecca Roberts. Now, if a first-time buyer is buying with someone who has bought before, can the first-time buyer grant still be accessed? Would you like to?
Yeah, I actually looked at that question recently, and it actually depends on how they're buying the property. There are different ways that you can have an ownership structure, and they are joint proprietors, which is usually for a husband and wife. The legal effect is that when one person dies, the survivor automatically inherits the entire property. And there are what they call tenants in common, where each of the individual owners owns a discrete proportion of the property. So, for example, 50-50, or if there are three of them, it could be a third each. My understanding with first homeowners is if you buy as tenants in common and one of you is a first homeowner, I believe that you do actually get the concession. With the joint proprietors, if you're buying with a spouse, for example, and your spouse has already owned a property, I don't think you qualify. So you've got to have a situation where, in that circumstance, both owners actually have never owned a property before.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions in regards to stamp duty? Anyone would like to ask? Or
Ron, I do. Excuse me, Ron.
Yes?
Are you qualified to advise on stamp duties in other states? Because I buy all up and down the East Coast.
Yeah, generally not advice, but we do interstate conveyancing. So I've actually got a New South Wales settlement today. We had a Queensland one. So part of the process is actually to assess the stamp duty, and even in terms of payment of stamp duty, the different states have got the different laws about when the stamp duty is payable. So we would, as a matter of course, assess the stamp duty in relation to each of the contracts. So the answer probably is yes in connection with purchasing property.
Thank you.
And the other thing, Veena, I just wanted to touch on, I think is important. You were talking about contract preparation, settlements. I must say, a lot of the states, Victoria and New South Wales, are in lockdown. We're still, from a legal perspective at least, continuing with the conveyancing process. We're preparing contracts. They're being executed electronically. Long gone are the days when an agent said, "Can you give me 5 copies of the contracts because we need to get them all signed." They're all being signed by DocuSign. There have been changes in the law to allow electronic execution of documents. The conveyancing process is now all done online via PEXA, and settlements are also done on PEXA, which is an online platform. Used to be that you had face-to-face settlements. Titles used to be handed over for checks. I don't know whether people remember all of that. Those days are pretty much gone, and you now do online settlements, which means even in what we call extraordinary times now, we're still actually on the legal side allowing the process of purchasing and settling properties. I know agents are finding it tough, but certainly in terms of the legal aspects of a conveyance, whether you're working from home or in the office, really hasn't impacted at all.
Sorry, can I ask a question, Ron?
Sure.
Just with the digital signing of documentation, are things like trust deeds allowed to be signed digitally? Because I'm still hearing that it's ideal to have a wet signature. Yeah,
I mean, the answer is ideally you're right. It is definitely better to have wet signatures because a trust deed is a little bit different. It's a long-term, meant to be a trust can last for up to 80 years, for example. On what we do though is you pay normally stamp duty $200 in Victoria for a trust deed. We will upload the trust deed online to the State Revenue Office and pay the stamp duty online. But yes, you're right. Ideally, it is better for a trust deed to have wet ink signature. Wills still should be signed wet ink as well. So that's the other one that is definitely recommended in terms of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions for Ron? Anyone? Alrighty. So I may move to Geoff White. Geoff White, we have a question. What's the biggest impact buyers are confronted with when searching for property?
Yeah, good question, V. Clearly, right now, it's the choice of property, the demand versus supply factor. We know that there are certain vendors at the moment that aren't necessarily running to the market because of the circumstances that if you're in Melbourne, for instance, at the moment with lockdown, inspections are almost impossible. So well, they are. So obviously the choice in the marketplace is one of the biggest issues that buyers are confronted with. And, the ability to be able to inspect the properties that they're actually online, that's probably the hardest thing at the moment. But look, there are, markets within markets too. And I think the point was made earlier about units and townhouses versus apartments. And, if you're in the apartment market, you might think, oh, well, there's so many available, the city's full of them and there's all these vacant apartments. Well, if you actually drill down to some of the precincts within the neighbouring areas, some of them are actually more tightly held than others. And there are certain precincts where to get an established 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment, it's not as easy as you think. So even the supply of certain apartments is down. That's probably the biggest impact that buyers are finding at the moment is the demand versus supply, and actually physically going to look at these properties and decide which one suits them at the moment.
Sure. Thank you. And any question for Geoff at this stage? Anyone? No? Okay. I may move to Stevie. Go ahead.
This is a good question for Geoff.
Yes.
How do you pivot so that those who do want to buy a property are satisfied that the property is in, say, good shape while they're, unable to actually go out and visit it?
Yeah, look, this is something that makes, I think, anyone quite nervous when involved with the transacting of the property. There's a lot of these virtual inspections that are taking place. Agents are going on site, basically walking through the property on a very personal one-to-one basis because the buyer can't go through on one-to-one. And they're walking through and, the buyer might say, look, can you show me the shower recess? And they'll get the phone and go through the shower recess. Look, that's pretty good. You'll get a very good feeling for it. But, if you're going to make an investment in a property, and a large investment, sight unseen, you have to be very, very aware that there might be things that you didn't pick up via the virtual inspection. So it might be different if you're going to rent a property. There's plenty of rentals happening still at the moment by agents doing virtual inspections. The sales side, I'd probably say, as a buyer, I probably wouldn't want to buy that way, but that doesn't mean it's for everybody. If it's an investment property, perhaps an investor mightn't be as detailed about the condition of the property. There's all of those sorts of things, but you need to be aware that, come final inspection, it's going to be more difficult if you haven't walked through it yourself, and you then walk through it at a final inspection and start to pick the eyes out of the property. So it is an awkward one. There are transactions taking place, and many of them on the basis that people are doing virtual inspections, and they're happy to buy that way. So that's fine.
Even more a problem. Sorry, Ron. I was going to say even more a problem when we're buying houses, of course, with build and pest inspections.
Correct.
And I find those and make those mandatory for my clients to have a build and pest, irrespective of where the property might be located. And it's impossible to have those as well now. And it's a very, very difficult process to suggest a client buy a house and land.
That's right.
Yeah, Jack, I'll add to that. Actually, it's interesting. In Victoria, they updated the Law Institute and REIV updated the standard form of contract, and there is definitely provision in the particulars of sale now where you can tick a box to say that the contract's conditional on either pest inspection or building report, and there are provisions about that. Normally, your purchaser would actually have to sign the contract subject to those conditions. And my understanding is in Victoria, at least, even with the lockdown restrictions, because of the fact that it relates to a property purchase, the buyer's representatives are actually permitted to go on the property and undertake, or their consultants, to do the property inspections to get those two reports.
That's correct.
Can I just add there too? I'm a buyer's advocate, licensed real estate agent. I buy a lot of property all over Victoria, and bought one last week. One thing that's been really obviously rising as an issue is the toxicity of homes. I bought a property for a builder the other day. They didn't do a building inspection because they were builders. Exactly what Geoff White said. The agent had a video of the property, so a walkthrough tour loaded on the portals. Wasn't a live walkthrough, so it was there for all to see. Very detailed and adequate. So the purchaser decided not to, go and inspect it with a building inspector, and then the property settled. And he found out that the tenants were ice addicts, and the house was riddled with toxicity through the house. And there's a $28,000 cleanup bill. So that's just something I'm coming across more consistently than ever in the last 12 months.
Well, actually, Geoff, that's a really interesting one, because they amended the Sale of Land Act, I think it was early last year, to make it mandatory on vendors, on sellers, to disclose what they call material facts. And what's interesting is they gave a whole lot of examples about what material facts are. And one of them specifically was whether the property actually was used for illegal drug making. So in one sense, in your scenario, it's interesting because I think there would have been a breach of the Sale of Land Act there, that the vendor failed to disclose a material fact.
The vendor didn't know. It was a tenanted property. The agent claimed ignorance. And just to clarify, they weren't manufacturing the ice; they were just they were users.
Right. Okay. I still think if a vendor knows about it, or a vendor's agent, that would be a material fact to disclose.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Another one I bought about 6 months ago. There was a manufacturing ice lab in the garage of a property I bought in Frankston, in between lockdown 3 or 4, whatever it was. And I was told by the agent who was managing it, who was aware the agents were manufacturing ice in the garage. I inspected, you can see barrels and canisters. It looked like a science lab in there. And they told me, no, ring the police. We got nothing to do with it. So the agent just said, no, we don't deal with it. I rang the Frankston police station, and they just washed their hands of it. They weren't really worried about it.
Very interesting. No, the Consumer Affairs website has actually published a guideline. There's a material facts guideline. So it's worth your while, really. It's good as a buyer's agent, because I think that that's very important. And I know there are a few buyer's agents out here to actually be aware of those of that in particular. And as I said, they've actually legislated it now in the Sale of Land Act. So it really is quite an interesting one. And they've given material, they've given examples. One of them, another one, which is a really interesting one, is has there ever been a murder at the property?
Yeah.
So, you know, and
I was about to bring that up. Murder was there for sure.
Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you, Ron.
Thank
No
you,
worries.
Jeff, and thank you, Ron. And I think that is, I think we brought us some key elements here, because if, you know, many people are investors and we are investors as well. So I think if we trust the property in the hands of, I think, real estate or property managers, like Ron did point out, there should be some laws to, you know, to protect the landlord, and there should be some laws around, you know, illegal, you know, activities or things which are, you know, not so right. So thank you for bringing that up, Jeff, and Ron, thank you kindly for, you know, pointing us to the right direction in regards to this. So
can I ask a question?
Yes.
Sorry, I did. Do you think that the stock levels will rise so people don't have this FOMO feeling, so they're buying sight unseen? Do you think the stock levels are going to increase?
I can perhaps add to that. I know that there's quite a bit of property in the pipeline ready to come onto the market. If you're looking at Melbourne, for example, there's many agents have signed up listings that are ready to come onto the market, but are not quite ready to launch them until they can take people through them. So yes, I think the stock levels will rise. Traditionally, they do in October after the grand final. We're in sort of the hands of the lockdown rules to a degree, but yes, it should, and it should get better. I think we've been probably through the worst of it, the winter, the lockdowns, all of those sorts of things. As we start to open up, and there's even talk on the front page of the Herald Sun today that there might be some easing of restrictions, and that might include inspections of properties. We don't know. Then if that were the case, I think you'd see quite a few listings come onto the market, as you'd expect.
And Geoff, if I can add to that, I've got a couple of clients, as I said, that are real estate agents, and they've said the same thing. They've actually had stock that they were listed for auctions, for example, in August, and they've deferred all of those out. So you might find a glut of properties. I don't know about the status of New South Wales, but certainly in Victoria, even now restrictions are regional, that properties that were going up for auction during lockdown, they've had to be deferred as well. And I've noticed it, and I've seen, I've spoken to people in the real estate industry that have said the same thing.
I think it's clear that we need to make a point that of the properties that are currently being auctioned, about 90 to 95% of them are selling. They're very high clearance rate. If there was to be a rise in the number of properties onto the market, and let's say the clearance rate came down to 75%, it's not as if the market's, you know, plummeting or anything like that. That's still a very healthy clearance rate. So I think the supply could be absorbed by an increase in demand, because buyers are also in a situation where they're not out looking as actively as they would too. So as the listings rise, I think the buyers will rise, and we'll be back to some normality hopefully soon. Yeah.
Just on that, Ron, too, I run a small boutique agency in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne as well, and I can tell you that I've got about 25 people. We don't do huge volume like the franchises, but I've got about 25 owners at the moment screaming to get their properties on the market. The minute we get a window, the market's going to flood.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just building up with massive momentum. That's Melbourne, just for Melbourne.
Yeah. And I know, look, I've noticed the same thing from a conveyancing point of view, that immediately after lockdown earlier this year, there were huge numbers. You know, we were getting on a Monday, we used to get emails from clients, from agents saying your client's bought this property, this one's been sold, and everything else. So that's exactly right. There's no doubt that there'll be a rush on once we're able to buy and sell again. And I think the other thing I was going to add, what's also important is from a legal point of view, certainly, I always say, you talk about having a look at the property. From legal aspects, I'd always recommend getting a lawyer to review a contract before you buy a property. That's part of your due diligence. And I've found a couple of really weird contracts. I had one recently where the client was buying a property. The title referred to a restrictive covenant, and the contract actually didn't even include a copy of the covenant. So, very important. We did our own searches to find out what the covenant was, and it was quite onerous. It was a single dwelling covenant. So, something like that, again, it's important for clients to do that. And I always advocate, do a review, make sure that from a legal perspective, the contract's okay and the property itself is all right for you.
Ron, can I just ask, would that make that 32 defective?
Probably yes, Michael. Yeah, the answer probably is it would be defective.
If it's not disclosed.
Correct. And I'm now actually advising the client, I'm giving the example because the client actually bought the property and then flicked the contract to me and was looking to do development. He said, my architect said there was a covenant there. And I looked at the contract and I saw the reference to it. It was only happened this week, so we're still dealing with it, Michael, but definitely something. And the other point I think I was going to raise, again, in terms of due diligence, for a lot of the properties that are in subdivisions, so with an owner's corporation, more and more I've seen in a Section 32 of Vendor's Statement, you need to have an owner's corporation certificate, and that's got to give details of any notices or orders affecting the property. With cladding now, the government are starting to serve notices to building notices to rectify and remove cladding, and I've seen a lot of contracts with those references. And Vina, you're in the area. I'd ask you that question. I've certainly found the banks are very reluctant to lend, and they're always asking, is this apartment subject to any cladding issues?
Yes, there are so many. So probably one thing that I would add here, like Ron said earlier, we do have lots of clients as well already sign a contract and then come to see a broker or sign a contract and then send the contract to the solicitor. So some people think that the general thought, like if people are young, some people are young, the fear of missing out, like there are probably 40 buyers for an inspection, or they all want to, secure the property. So, and we do find that lately, probably the last from January and so forth, that most vendor or real estate agents would prefer not subject to finance, you know what I mean, that you have unconditional approval. So having said that, there are so many clients who don't want to miss out, so they sign the contract. So some of them sign the contract without realizing whether they do have a cooling off period or not. Right. And having said that, so they don't even know, firstly, if they do qualify or whether, they can purchase. Or some of them, like Ron mentioned, the contract has not even been assigned to a solicitor, haven't been even verified. So, and the other elements that Ron just brought in regards to cladding and in regards to, there's so many elements in lending. So that's why we thought, let's have this session, because there are so many elements in purchasing a property, which is very, very complex. Sometimes we think, no, it's not complex. I know that I have a full-time job. I know that me and my partner work. We are, an X amount of salary. We can easily borrow because we have deposit. So at the end of the day, it's also noting, okay, like, how's the property tracking? Like Geoff gave us an idea about, okay, how's the property market going, or which suburb are performing better, or where to buy, or, how Jack and probably Geoff talked about units, we talked about apartments and so forth, you know. Everything has got its own legalities. Then, as Ron pointed out, will the bank lend if there are, you know, X criteria, or, you know, what the other point that I'll bring here when we're talking about property, you know, we talk about purchasing a townhouse, or we talk about purchasing apartment, unit, you know, we're talking about body corporate, we're talking about, like, you know, so many issues like with contracts. So that's why the journey of a buyer is very complex from the start to the end. So, like, I answer Ron's question, like, every lender has, the one thing that we have to know, every lender have got their own policies. And as this, from the pandemic, from time pandemic from last year, there has been so many changes in regards to policy. There has been so many changes in regards to type of properties. And as we all know, probably we have lots of buyers agents and real estate agents as well. There are different type of postcode restrictions as well for lenders, category 1, 2, and 3, and so forth. So whether you're an investor or whether you're a first home buyer, there's so many elements to take into account. So, probably I'll bring Stevie-Jade in here, because we have a very good question for our audience. Now, I have cash saved up. When should I start looking, and what can I afford with the debt repayments? So, Stevie, would you like to you know, just elaborate on that for us?
I get this question a lot from clients. So yeah, they have like a set amount of money there, and they want to know, like, is that enough? Do I pull the trigger now? Do I start looking? And it's got a lot to do with that borrowing power conversation initially, just to understand, you know, what a lender will lend to. But I like it when clients get a little bit more strategic and they say, we're looking for this type of property, but I want to be able to do other things with my cash flow. I want to be able to, you know, pay extra off the debt, or I want to be able to contribute to super, or have other investments. Like, what's the right mix in my cash flow for debt repayments post on the other side of the purchase? And so I like working with clients about that sort of strategy and going, all right, well, if 30%, let's say that's pretty healthy, of your cash flow goes to your debt, it's not eating up too much, you've got other things to do there, let's reverse engineer it and work backwards. You know, what's the mortgage payment based on current rates? What does that look like in terms of the loan that you're going to get to the borrowing power? Is there wiggle room? Because if you're kind of under the borrowing power, you know that your lender is going to love you. They're going to tick that box really quickly. It's going to be nice for Vina, for the mortgage broker, to put through. But then on the other side of it, they're really comfortable with the mortgage payment as well. So they're not like stretching themselves. They're not going right to that limit. They're not kind of boxing themselves into a corner to buy a property that, you know, 40 other people want to buy. So they're in a bit more of a position of power, and I love that's when I love getting I guess a bit hands-on with clients, really tidying up their cash flow and working with them to make sure that looks really great, and then yeah, helping them execute that. It's a bit more seamless, I find, when I work with clients in that way. It tends to be quite a nice smooth process, and nice when I hand it to the mortgage broker as well.
Thank you. Do you have questions for Stevie in regards to planning? Cash saved? No?
If I could, though, really quickly on that, I was going to say, I don't know if you've been paying attention to your super, but in the last 12 months, most super funds are returning up around 20%. So what I touched on before with the, you know, don't leave it sitting in cash if you can't buy within the next couple of years, like, you can mimic the way that your super is invested and just set something up outside of super that's going to be returning that sort of stuff. So you're not missing out. That's the thing. I think people just feel like if it's not now, it's never, but that's not true.
Thank you. Romana, you had a question?
Yeah, I do actually have a question. Thanks for that insight also, Stevie, but I guess I've got quite a few questions that I'm leaving to the end. But one with regards to finance is I do come across a lot of clients that are cash rich, but they are deposit poor. And that makes, the whole deposit type of aspect really, really difficult. Now, I don't I'm trying to get a bit more insight onto that, especially from our foreign investors who are, I think they have to pay more stamp duty than Australians do, which is another headache. So, the foreign investment part in Australia has become quite difficult, even with low interest rates. It's really just a deposit part. So is there any advice, or what are your thoughts around the deposit part when you have people that earn a lot but don't really have the initial cash?
You want to answer that, Stevie, or would you want me to answer?
I have something to say, but I might let you go first, I might jump on the end there if that's okay.
Okay, alrighty. So first thing first, I think when we purchase, when we are in the market or we're looking to buy or purchase a property, I had probably one question as well for today. How much deposit do I need? How much cash deposit do I need? Now, first thing first, when people want to purchase, yes, everybody wants to purchase because, okay, this is what we want, right? Whether we want to buy, whether we are a first home buyer or whether we are an investor. But at the end of the day, your deposit is your strength. That's the way you have to look at it. It's not about whether you want to put 2% deposit in a purchase or whether you want to put 5% or whether you want to put 10%. At the end of the day, what you have to know is the amount of cash that you hold as deposit will work towards your own benefit and your own interest, right? So lots of people say, oh, maybe, especially first home buyer, probably they've taken time to save and they want to know, can I put just 5%? You know what I mean? Or can I put just 2%? Or what are the incentives that we have? But at the end of the day, if you put 5%, you have to understand that you will hit lender's mortgage insurance whenever you put just 10%, you will pay lender's mortgage insurance. So now if you put just 5% deposit, think about it this way, your lender's mortgage insurance will be much higher. So at the end of the day, it rests on you as an individual or as an individual buyer. What would you want? Would you want to put more deposit and pay less mortgage, lender's mortgage insurance? Or how you want to feel that you are in a better position that will work for you? Now, for investors, okay, it's a different story because you are an investor. If you put 10%, put 5%, you pay a higher lender's mortgage insurance. There are tax implications there. You can, use that when you do your tax return. That is a different, investors are different, but for first home buyer. But at the end of the day, again, it is about you as an individual, what you're comfortable with and what will work for you. Yeah, I hope that answers the question in a general way. And Stevie, you go.
Yeah. I'd love to add to that. I actually had clients very recently. They basically had enough of a deposit for that 10% sort of minimum. And they were working to a really short deadline because they were trying to plan for a second child. So they were basically like, we have to buy in the next 2 years, or we have to buy sort of when the kids are at school, because then I'll be back, the two people will be back at work full time, and their cash flow could accommodate that. So when I did the math and it is nice in a perfect world to be able to have that 20% deposit so you don't but in this situation, when I did the math and when I looked at how the market has changed in the last 12 months, they were actually better off to really crunch down on their cash flow, tighten it all up and try and buy in the next 12 months, even with a little bit of LMI, because if they had waited, they're going to pay that LMI in the market growth anyway. So in that scenario with them, it was the right thing to do to try to buy sooner with that little bit of LMI, but it was in the right range where they weren't paying that higher tier LMI, they were paying a lower tier LMI. So it actually did, in this situation, work out better for them.
Can I also add two other points, actually, just really quickly on what Romana was saying and actually what Mina was asking me as well, and that is for the foreign stand, so there's there's a surcharge or additional stamp duty in relation to the purchase of a residential property by a foreigner, and the current additional rate is 8%. So that is, you pay your normal stamp duty and then you pay an additional 8%. One of these issues include a foreign trust. So a foreign trust is if you've got foreign beneficiaries, and Mina was asking about trusts earlier. So there's an obscure section in the Duties Act in Victoria that says that if there's a discretionary or a family trust where you can distribute to family members, every beneficiary is deemed to be entitled to 100%. So most of us, if not all of us, will have relatives that are overseas, and therefore it could actually be deemed inadvertently to be a foreign trust. So what we always recommend, and we prepare our trust deeds in-house, is to actually have a provision in the trust deed which specifically excludes foreign beneficiaries. And that way, if the State Revenue Office ever actually audited that particular transaction, you wouldn't be subject to the extra stamp duty. So I just wanted to put that in. It was just something that Roman was asking, and Mina, about trust deeds.
So, can I ask a question?
Can I?
So, to Stevie, have you ascertained whether it's better to pay LMI and go with the purchase of the property rather than just wait until you've got that high level of deposit where you don't need to pay LMI, compared to if I do pay LMI and the capital gain is going to more than offset that additional amount that I'm going to pay?
Yeah, it's very much dependent on everyone's unique situation. And in this particular one, where that was the case, their purchase price and what the mortgage payments were going to be on the other side. Their mortgage payments are only going to be 20% of their cash flow, so quite low. And their purchase price made it, was it kind of about that 800, 900,000. So the LMI on that with their 10% deposit was basically, when you look at the growth in the last 12 months, they were going to pay that regardless. Does that make sense? So in that situation, it was like, do you know what? You may as well just do it and get in there now and then ride the growth on the other side. But if the purchase price was higher or lower, or the cash flow looked a little different, that might not have been the outcome. It's really dependent on everyone's personal situation and the uniqueness of your situation.
I think some people don't want to pay the LMI, but they might forget that even if I pay LMI, the capital growth is going to more than offset that additional, the amount that I paid for the LMI, and will just position me to buy another property, maybe even sooner.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, it's everyone's.
Oh, sorry. Can I ask a real quick question? I have to jump off. The deposit scheme, the super deposit scheme, what are your thoughts on that, considering the amount of tax having to pay when it is released on the other side?
Yeah, good question. So again, it's very linked. The answer is very linked. It's actually really unique to different situations. So sometimes I see it work really well as part of the plan to help leverage and buy, to invest the extra into super and then pull it out when you want to do that later on. And they've just increased that limit as well recently. So I have seen it work really well as part of a strategy to help people do that, usually when there's a shorter time frame. But when you're kind of delaying it or doing it a bit later on, sometimes I can see that it doesn't work, and you may as well just build that sort of investment outside of super, because, as you say, the tax. So it's, again, unique to different situations. Sometimes it works really well, sometimes it's not the right thing for people.
Yes, that's very well explained.
Yeah, no, good question. Even on the legal side, the structuring of contracts and finance and everything, Abby, is very different when it's self-managed super compared to buying outside of super.
I was more talking about the super scheme, super saver scheme.
Yeah, that's where you tip extra in to help you buy later that you can pull out. That's what you're talking about?
That is what I'm talking about. And I know that you can contribute the savings amount into your super that you can then withdraw later. So effectively it goes in tax-free, but then you're getting taxed when you get it out at your marginal tax rate. So, you know, obviously if you're withdrawing an extra 25, 30,000 on top of your regular income, you're going to be paying that. It's quite a high tax rate. I just don't see that it offsets very well, that's all.
It's actually, if you actually make pre-tax contributions. So I think your understanding of the tax might be a little, maybe not
pre-tax contributions, but you pay tax on it as it comes out.
Yeah, no, there's definitely different. We might take that offline because there might be something that you're not picking up. But you're right. You can use it to leverage that, but it does depend on everyone's situation. But there is more tax effectiveness to it than maybe you know.
Sorry, I might reach out to you offline. But thanks everyone. I've got to jump off, but it's been really, really informative. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're unless there's maybe one last question, we're nearly at the end and we might wrap it up shortly anyway. Are there any last questions?
I think I may ask the last one, what's hot and what's not hot in the market now, Geoff?
That's Geoff.
Look, I think there's a lot that's hot and maybe not that much that's not. Certainly the market, if I use Melbourne as an example, the market certainly up to 600,000 has been really strong. There's been, the house market is probably more stronger than the apartment market. The data would show that. There's really some strength in the outer middle ring and outer areas from the city as well, which, you know, in an ordinary market going back many years, that wasn't necessarily the case. The inner market tended to drive more of the market overall. But yeah, look, that's probably it. But there's the only soft part of the market is probably the very inner city apartment market that where buildings are built for investors. That's probably the softest, but it's not dead by any stretch of the imagination. So yeah, I hope that answers it.
Can I add to that? Hi, R-Byrne. I got here late. The commercial office warehouses, a lot of people moving out of the city, moving out of their bigger, expensive rents, buying office commercial. No stamp duty impost on those, MENA. There's no 8% additional for foreign investors. So there's 5% yields in those. People were talking about yields, body corporates, and all the rest of it. If anyone wants to know more about that, I've been getting into that space lately as well.
And no, you're right, Armand. The additional foreign stamp duty is only on residential, so that's great. The only other one which is relevant, I was going to touch very quickly on commercial, is that once again, the commercial tenancy rent relief scheme, where tenants impacted by the coronavirus, where they've got a drop of more than 30% of their turnover, can again apply to landlords for rent relief. That was introduced last year. It finished at the end of JobKeeper in March, and it's been reintroduced again as of the end of July, the 28th of July, and the regulations just came in this week. So that's definitely another topic, but I was going to raise that for commercial properties.
Maybe the second session, Property Cove, we can bring that on board, because that is very, very, at the moment, I think everyone would like to have the latest, Ron.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think that will be good. And I think on that note, we're pretty much on 9 o'clock, so we might wrap it up. But on behalf of all of the speakers, we wanted to thank everyone for their really warm participation. We weren't really sure how it would work. The four of us got together and said, let's maybe put it out there, reach out to actually experts, because all of you guys are professionals in your own field, and see whether we can have a little bit of a question and answer, a little bit of discussion. We really actually welcomed everyone's participation and comments and questions. I think without you guys, it would have been pretty boring, and hopefully we all got a little bit of benefit out of it. They always say the teacher's the one that learns the most, and certainly I've learned a lot from everyone's questions and and comments, and I know I'm speaking on behalf of everyone else. So we'll try and do this on a regular basis. I think we've had, as I said, really good feedback and everything, and hopefully everyone stays safe and stays healthy, and we might try and do something like this face-to-face one day, hopefully in the not too near future.
Yes, definitely, that's the plan. So I would like to thank our panelists today, Geoff White, Stevie-Jade, Ron, and they always come with the latest market update as well, and with the latest information. And I really like your participation, all of you, and every one of us. Whatever we bring on board is valuable. So let's keep up the great spirit, the good work, the collaboration, because at the end of the day, we all want your collaboration and participation so that we can help our community, especially in hard times as it is right now. So thank you, everybody. And we look forward to the next session. So we'll keep you up to date with the next session, and have a lovely day. And take care and keep well and keep safe. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Good on you.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
Again, Geoff.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. See you, Jack. See you.